Good morning from the Utah Valley University Office for Global Engagement. I'm your host, Baldomero Lago, and I welcome you to our program on Taking Action. Taking Action is a virtual discussion among faculty, students, community members to address the relevance, implementation, and promotion of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals are a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and improve the lives and prospects of everyone, everywhere. The 17 goals were adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015, and as part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which set out a 15-year plan to achieve the goals. Today, we're discussing Sustainable Development Goal number 5, to achieve gender equality and to empower all women and girls. Gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. During this session, feel free to ask questions in the Facebook comments window. If time permits, I will address a select few. Today, I have 3 wonderful panels that understand well gender equality. We have with us Samira Harnish, founder and executive director of Women of the World. We also have with us Tara Ivie, Senior Director of the Women's Success Center at Utah Valley University, as well as the We Care Center. And of course, we have Susan Madsen, Founding Director of Utah and Women and Leadership Project. And at this time, I welcome the 3 ladies with us. And at this time, I'm going to ask if they could introduce themselves and some of the things that they're working on, some of the projects they're behind. So let's go ahead and start with Samira. Samira, welcome.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me in here today. So my name is Samira Harnish. I'm the founder and executive director of Women of the World organization. Women of the World is a local nonprofit organization that has been internationally recognized for its service to women who are refugee and asylum seeker and immigrant in Salt Lake City. So our focus is what works best for our women to achieve independence quickly and effectively, namely educational, employment opportunities, and English proficiency. So we've been in here since 2010 and helping women, 800 women a year. And yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Tara, welcome.
Thank you so much, Baldomero. So I get the privilege of working at the Women's Success Center here at Utah Valley University. We're the largest public institution in the state, which means we have a very large student body to serve. Our focus is on helping women get to college and graduate in a timely manner. That includes a variety of services direct to students. One of those is, in fact, childcare. That's our We Care Center, to support our third of our student population who has children. We also are launching a faculty initiative this year, building out partnerships among our different schools and colleges to ensure we've got really symbiotic relationships between academics and our student affairs programming, and leveraging high impact practices to help students succeed.
Excellent, thank you. Susan Madsen, welcome.
It's great to be here with you and great to be with my colleagues, Tara and Samira as well. They do fabulous work. So I am the Karen Haight Huntsman Professor of Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. I was actually at Utah Valley University for 18 years before shifting this summer. And the wonderful thing is the work that I do around the state with the Utah Women in Leadership Project really combines partnering with all the universities and colleges and nonprofits and other women's groups, as well as the governor's office, especially this new governor that just came in, the Cox-Henderson administration, on the work that we do at the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women in a very broad way. So we serve Utah and its residents by first producing relevant and trustworthy and applicable research. That's our big core of what we do. Second, creating and gathering really valuable resources like podcasts and event videos and infographics and all kinds of resources like curriculum. And then finally, to convene trainings and events that really inform, inspire, and ignite growth for and change for Utahns. So that's what we do, and we actually run lots of events, like I said, and do lots of things, and I do a lot of speaking. So it's great to be with you today and be able to talk about some issues that are very near and dear to my heart, and I know the same for Tara and Samira. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Well, please, would you be able to educate us, me, the community, on, since today we're talking about gender equality, why is it important? And also, can you tell us a little bit about, because, you know, individuals need to understand well some of the definitions that is around in the publications on what is gender mainstreaming. So why don't we start with you, Susan, and maybe also we can get a flavor, the global lens flavor coming from Samira, gender equality and global mainstreaming.
Absolutely. I'll actually talk about the difference. We actually use the words equality and equity often interchangeably. So you see those words all of the time, but they actually mean different things.
Absolutely.
And I'm moving more towards equity in the language I use instead of equality. Correct. What equality really means is to get everyone equal. We assume that everybody is in the same place. And so the visuals that you'll see on the web all over are when you have an obstruction, like you're watching a baseball game or something, that's a vision. You know, basically you give everybody the same size little footstool to stand on. And so you get the person that's at the lowest barely looking over the fence, right? So equality really is, let's give everybody everything equal no matter where they're starting. So equity really comes with an assumption that people don't all start from the same place. And so we give people what they need to rise up and be able to do things like be safe and find jobs and go to college and take care of those opportunities. And then of course we talk about sometimes the best thing is just to try and remove the obstruction in the way for everybody so that everybody responds. But equality, again, we're assuming everybody's starting from the same place, giving everybody equal access, but we're all starting from the same place. Equity assumes we're not starting from the same place. And sometimes we have to give, and both of my colleagues will understand this, you have to give opportunities to people that just have not had the opportunities before.
Did you want to touch a little bit on gender mainstreaming?
I'll let Samira jump on that.
Go for it, Samira.
Well, I'll go with the why gender equality important. I'm not ready to say about the mainstreaming really, but for me, from my point of view, that's why I dedicate myself to South Women of the World organization, is when I noticed the forcibly displaced women were being pushed away from services, and these women's needs were they were underfunded. So also if women are primarily earned for their family, either because they are single women, a mother, or their husband is not working, a woman's income will need to be equal to a man. And since the woman is responsible for family, home, and child education, she needs to be treated equally in society in order for the families and children to be supported in community. This is my answer for the equality. And I can jump in with the mainstreaming as well. And oftentimes that term is really used for policies. Like oftentimes we just put together policies that we assume will affect everyone equal, and what we know that isn't the case. So if you have a gender lens or a race lens, on those things, you just have to ensure that all of the diversity elements are really included, and gender mainstreaming is really focuses on that to make sure there's a gender lens. I don't know if all of you have read the book Invisible Women. Oh my gosh, that is the most powerful book on how a lot of policies and a lot of decisions are made
generally for everybody in the population, but they really aren't. They really are not. They're really focused on white men mostly because it's not considered. So you really have to have a different lens when you think about gender mainstreaming.
Thank you.
To build on what Susan said, oh, I'm sorry, Baltimore.
No, go
to
for
build
it.
on what Susan said, gender mainstreaming is such a critical concept when we look at any establishment or updates, whether it's policies, programs, outreach. The other example that I would use is medicine. Historically, it's only been in the 1980s and later that women's bodies were actually used regularly in medical research. And there are fundamental differences between men and women's bodies. So all of the medical literature that came before that was really focused on men's bodies, but it was perceived as it was appropriate for everybody. So that's a great example of where we have to have intentional design. If you're studying heart disease, you can't just study men, you have to study men and women and do that very intentionally so that we make sure observations, interventions, etc., apply for both of those genders.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for your answers in regarding equality, equity, and also mainstreaming. But ladies, globally, women have fewer opportunities for economic participation than men, less access to basic and higher education, greater health and safety risks, and less political representation. Tell us about your work in relation to gender equality. And the reality is, due to this pandemic, has COVID set this back even further? Who would like to take that one?
Yeah, I'll jump in there.
Okay.
I think all of us have really strong opinions on this piece because it's the core of our work, and we serve slightly different populations, but that's really the motivator behind what we're doing. There is definite constriction that's happened because of the COVID pandemic worldwide, where women's bandwidth is being eaten up in areas that it hasn't previously. In the United States, we're seeing a huge trend of the pink recession, as they're calling it. And some publications are even saying we're back to 1950s employment trajectories and projections, which is a really, really scary concept for the future of not just the country, individual families, their children, and the impact that can have generationally. For me, my approach in work is really focused on education and the empowerment of women through education. And that, depending on the context you're in some countries, that's primary education, where women, young girls, once they are, pubescent and they begin menstruating, they often step away from school. And that becomes a huge barrier for them moving forward. Here in the United States, it's access to higher education, college, that is our bigger barrier. So identifying where that educational gap is and ensuring you have intentional policies to make sure that young girls and women can continue through their educational process in a way that's financially feasible, that's culturally supported, and that's socially sustainable are critical steps if we want to see any kind of equity moving forward.
That was excellent. Any last comment? Yes, Samira.
So women of the world, we are always, works only for women because they have fewer access to resources and fewer opportunity to learn English than both their kids and their husband. So that's why we are in here, to have to teach them the practical English and the intensive English, But I want to say about the COVID-19 has absolutely, set up back, most of forcibly displaced people. They are working in low-income jobs already. And women especially are more likely to work on the front lines, because of their little English. Unfortunately, they work in a grocery store, hospital, in hotels, and the first things is impacted these places, and of course, they impact the economic recession. So I found out myself, we're working twice more because COVID-19.
I'll
Susan.
jump in. I'll
Oh.
jump in really quick too, because
Sure.
you brought up many issues in that question. That was a big question, I have to say.
That's all
But
right.
there's one, and I'm on board with everything that was said. But one thing you tagged on at the end was representation of women in politics. And I will tell you, you see the effects all over the world. I do lots of global work as well, but I've seen it even play out right here in Utah in this last legislative session. So we slipped this last year back to 40th in the nation for the percentage of women who are in Utah state legislature, with all the things that we've talked about, with education, with safety, with the opportunities for economic opportunities for women of all over the world. The more often you have women represented in political parliaments or systems or city councils or whatever, the more you have more equal representation of policies and of decisions. We know this. And so the research in the United States says that state legislatures who have more women give more funding to education, to healthcare, to programs for children, to social programs like homelessness and poverty. So when we don't have as many women in our political groups, these things are just not addressed. They're not priorities. And we have great men who serve too. But the best thing is we need more equal numbers of men and women working together to really do the best things for our colleges, for our organizations, for our state, and for our countries.
You know, I totally agree with you. In fact, it's for me, sometimes it's so challenging. As you all know, I'm originally from Spain, and the Spanish government believes on having parity in all offices and all representations at the government level. So when I hear these things here in my own local state where I live, you know, it's pretty honestly disappointing. So the great work that you folks are doing to enhance and to motivate women to be participants of this discussion, I think is pivotal. I think is remarkable. But going back to both of you, Susan, or well, the three of you, okay, could you please tell them, let's record this, okay, so we can advertise this, but how are women and girls being discriminated against everywhere? What is being done and what can we do to correct this problem?
That's a big question.
You want to tack that on, or Tara, or whoever? I'll leave it up to you.
I just finished, so.
Okay, Tara, go for it.
I will try to answer at least parts of that really big question. I think we've already touched on this in a lot of ways, where we historically policy, law, practice in pretty much every system was really set up for men. So the need is going back to really intentionally review processes, systems, et cetera, with that mainstreaming lens. And I think the complex factor that comes in when we talk about this is intersectionality. We've got, I mean, we're talking specifically about gender, but we don't experience gender in isolation. We also experience gender along with all of our other personal profile. So, you know, our race and ethnicity, our geography, our socioeconomic status, all of those things layer together to give us a lens and a perspective on the world. And it also gives other people lens and perspective on us. And the inequities that are experienced are significantly more for people of color. They're significantly more for people who are in the LGBT community, especially trans individuals. So we really have to be mindful as we talk about discrimination that gets exponentially worse as we add in intersectional identities. And so solving a problem for, you know, if we solve it just for gender in isolation, it's really not fixing the issue. We have to take those larger pieces into account.
Excellent.
I would just jump in to say one of the things that I've, through the research, I'm a scholar and researcher, that I found through the years, and I do a lot more of, is unconscious bias training. So many of the issues that Tara talked about and all the things we've talked about thus far really are invisible to a lot of people. They're often, we have an invisible masculine culture in companies and organizations often, and we just don't see it. And you know, I'm a white woman, so I'm invisible. You know, I'm invisible to white, so you know, anything other than white as well. So actually helping people really understand that biases, we all have biases, we're all sexist, we're all racist, we're all ageist, we're all of those things, because most of what we do with our brain, when you look at it, is unconscious. So to stop, you can't just, you have to have policy, you have to have procedures, you have to look at your systems, you have to do all of that. We have to build women, people of color, but we also need to, every one of us, look at our own biases and be open to saying, wait, I need to learn, I need to grow, I need to do better.
That is great. Thank you. Samira, any
Is it from my point of view with the women, the forcibly displaced women from all over the world, you know, the discrimination for the girls, I will say add for what Tara said and Susan, is lack of access of parental planning resources like contraception and abortion. And the other things is, unfortunately, very young to get married, you know, forced to marry because of the family honor, honor and shame if the young teenager lose her virginity, and the fistula as well. So this is the women that I see in there. So how to correct this problem? The advocate for them, you know, I mean, I remember one of the young lady that she has a master's degree from her background, from her country. And she told me, she was working in a retail place. And she came and she said, Samira, always I train the men to in this job, but I'm always being pushed away, and they get a better pay and a better position. What do I do? You know, I'm afraid to speak because they're afraid to speak. They don't have the confidence to speak, is because they thought if I speak, I'm going to get fired and I'm going to send back to our, you know, to the camp. So I talked to her and I told her, you know, just go ahead and talk to your boss and say, what can I do to be in this kind of position? Don't be afraid. So we give them that confidence, and we give them that, you know, to advocate for them and to teach them, this is your human right, you need to talk. So as American, we speak and loud and all these things, but I mean, for our ladies, you know, coming from different countries, you know, they have always this kind of problem, and that's why we are in here.
Can I just quickly
Sure.
just set a stage for something that Samira said, something so important, that no matter where you're at, including Spain, I know research on Spain, I've presented there and in other European countries, women struggle with discrimination. We struggle with safety issues more, sexual assault. We struggle with the wage gap, no matter where we're at, all over the world and in every state. However, in the state of Utah, we see all of those things like less women in STEM, so, you know, we see it exaggerated. And the group that the folks in developing countries and refugees and immigrants, same issues, but very exaggerated because they struggle even more with all of these issues. I just wanted to put that point out there, that we see these things in every country, in every society, but amongst certain people, like people of color and people from different countries, we see all of those issues in more extreme ways.
You're totally correct there. Susan, when I mentioned the comment on Spain is because the government believes some parity when it comes to all the offices they are established throughout the government. But we are having a major issue in the country, and this is a worldwide issue. I mean, women are being beaten, women are being killed, women, and that is that is a thorn as nationals. That is a thorn that we have to carry and we have to fight. and we still, having concerns in regards to how women are being exploited even to this day. But interesting enough, just less than a month ago, I was at home and I just turned on the news, and lo and behold, here I am listening that in Orem, and the wonderful city of Orem, just 3 weeks ago in Orem, there were some arrests in regards to trafficking, human trafficking, and sexual exploitation. I mean, that is happening in our backyard. Where are we? I thought we were in the 21st century, but what is going on?
And I think sex trafficking is one of those topics that people get really uncomfortable talking about, for one. It is definitely predominantly women who are sexually trafficked. Men are as well. The ages at which that begins is terrifying, especially for anybody who's a parent of young children, because it gets younger and younger every decade. I think there are topics like sexual trafficking that when we talked about gender mainstreaming earlier in this conversation, that's another thing that we need to normalize the discussion of. It makes people uncomfortable, so it tends not to be discussed, so it gets swept under the rug. And until we have a major news story that breaks, we are not responsive to that. I was recently traveling in a high tourist area, and as I went through this large hotel that was in Las Vegas, as I went through this large hotel complex, I used one of their restrooms, and in every single stall, they had a sign on the wall that said, if you're seeing or experiencing signs of sexual trafficking, such as, and it had a bullet list of things to watch for and a phone number to call. That kind of conversation should not just be happening in Las Vegas. That should be far more common, because it's happening in schools around us, where family members are actually creating that abusive environment for young girls and young boys. And I think the normalization of that conversation is the only way, right? Shine the light on the thing so we can address it. I don't want to pivot, and take us too far off course here, but I think I want to call back to something that Samira said earlier, where she talked about planning your families. The ability to plan your pregnancies and space your pregnancies is one of the most critical things for women's health worldwide. And in the United States, we have such a higher level of access to birth control. That's something we often don't think about. But it is absolutely imperative on the educational front to understand why that matters to plan and space pregnancies for the health of the mother and for the health of the child. But ensuring that access to birth control is available is essential. It is just as essential as vaccines for children. So ensuring that becomes a normalized part of the conversation. And I think all of these things tie together, where we really have a lot of cultural and societal taboos against anything to do with women's bodies. They've been hypersexualized, but we can't talk about menstrual health. They've been, publicly displayed, but we can't talk about lactation, right? We have to normalize the things that are natural, normal functions of being a human being and being half of the people on the earth, while, getting rid of the abusive cultural tropes that come along in our current popular media.
Wow. Thank you, Tara. Thank you for hitting into that. Okay, well, let me move on into another question that really boils me inside. Believe me, this is so frustrating to me, and that is equal pay on gender. Let's talk about this for a second. Just according to the Salt Lake Tribune, Utah has now the American biggest gender wage gap. Women earn 70 cents on the dollar compared to men. And I remember Senator Luz Escamilla, she's a dear friend. I've known her for a long time. She came out with a wonderful proposal just for an equal pay study, just an equal pay study to level salaries comparable to men in the same positions. And the legislature actually turned it down. My goodness. I mean, what is going on? I know that, Susan, you're working closely with the governor's office. What's happening? Where are we in that regard?
Yeah, through the years, we've always been able to say that Wyoming was worse. And some studies still kind of say that, but some of the recent ones say that we're the worst. There's a couple of important things there. first of all, we don't have time today to talk about it, but anyone listening, there is so much to understand, so many layers of depth when you take on the 70 cents to $1 in terms of how that plays out and how many things are involved in that. We know in the state of Utah, we have significantly more women in more traditional fields when they major in college. We have less in STEM, we have less in computer science, those things. So you can take some of those things into account and some of our cultural things. But the bottom line is, when you get right down to it and look deeply at the data, there is still discrimination. There is still things that we need to fix, and we do need to fix that. And Senator Escamilla, I've worked with her for the last few years on this thing, and the government has just shut it down. Like, we don't want a good in-depth analysis. However, this new administration is looking differently on that. This year, I'm working again with two other people in the administration on looking at equality and opportunity, the area for the governor's office. And so what we're doing this year, at least at the state government, is to do an internal review, which is more than we've ever been able to do. But the hope is that next year there will be an independent review that really by experts that can go deep into comparison and figuring out, some economists that can really look at that. But the point, one of the things that kind of bugs me, I'll just have to say about Utah, is we still have so many people that say, oh, it's a myth. Oh my gosh, there is so much research. That just shows that we're just not even there to realize. So we need to get people to realize, including our state legislature, that this really is an issue and that we need to address it. And it's really more complex than most people think. So some people still just dismiss it, but it's way too much research to show that it is an issue and we need to take it on. And I do need to say that some companies, we have some areas of state government, some companies that are taking this seriously and really doing internal audits within their organizations. So we're seeing some light in a few places.
That sounds exciting. Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, speaking of gender equality as a goal under the Sustainable Development, one of the aims or one of the indicators is to ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making and political, economic, and public life. And you know, Susan, you just brought attention a little bit on the political aspect. Now let's look at what's happening currently at the government. Currently, today at the US government, there are 3 women and 7 men appointed to cabinet positions. There are 9 women and 5 men waiting for approvals. It is very apparent that this is a different makeup at the cabinet level from the previous administration. How are we doing locally? I think you touched a little bit about this, but how are we coming along? The fact that we have now a lieutenant governor that is a woman, and the previous one was Olin Walker, who I adore, but that's it. That's our history. 2 lieutenant governors, female lieutenant governors, right? How are we doing? Is this coming into pieces? Are we having a comprehensive conversation when it comes to, hey, we need to share the responsibility here?
I just talked last, but I'll give you a short one and let someone else talk.
Great.
But we just released 2 briefs in the last few months that actually highlight qualitative experiences of women running for office, but also where everybody's at. And we've gone up a little bit in the executive roles. We still have 0 women in Congress, which is problematic. We had Mia Love at least a few years ago, but that's problematic. We have nobody watching out really for and representing women's voices. We have decreased in the state legislature slightly, as I mentioned before. We are seeing some good news with some mayors. We are up to a whole 17%. That's not great in some ways, but it's 9% better than our last brief, and a little bit higher in city council, and at the city level, a little bit higher in terms of counties, so county commissioners and so forth. So bottom line, we're seeing some movement. We're seeing some things happening. But I'll tell you, it's really problematic when we have our state legislature as low as we have, because there are committees, subcommittees happening with 0 women on them, 0. And men and women just come from different, we're not every man's the same, not every woman's the same, but we have different perspectives, and not having women in that is really disadvantaging the state of Utah. We're not able to serve all Utahns in the best ways that they need to be served.
Susan, I echo your voice when it comes, we need female representation in DC coming from the state of Utah. If any of you would like to take that endorsement, I will be more than happy. I'll be your campaign chair manager, whatever you ask me to do. But it is so critical that we have, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Samira.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with everything Susan, she said, but for the diversity, I will say Utah political leadership is not representative of the diversity of our state. The state is run in a way that fails to represent broad groups of people, like the new neighbors that women of the world we serve. That's all I wanted to say.
And if I can jump there too, I want to reinforce something that Susan said, both in that response and one that was a bit earlier, where the last cycle when we were electing mayors, and Provo City had historically never had a female mayor. In the primary, they had multiple female candidates. And during the primary, I believe it was Deseret News or Salt Lake Trib came and did a poll for Provo residents to figure out, ask the question, are you ready for a female mayor? Is Provo ready for a female mayor? And the answer was 68% said no. I mean, going back to what Susan said earlier about cultural change, the readiness is not good. Now, the great news from that is the 2 folks who made it through the primary were both women. And we have Mayor Kafusi now. But I think it really speaks to that readiness for change that is an essential part of this overall conversation. And I want to speak to the elephant in the room, virtual room as it were, of we often talk about we're only having white male representation. And that's not because we don't want white male representation. We just want to see representation that is equal to the demographic they're supposed to be representing. So we need a lot more Latino and Latinas in leadership and public office. We have a growing population there that's absolutely underrepresented. And so it's not, we don't want white men involved. We want them involved. We just want to make sure representation is there across the board.
And I just have to, I totally am on board with what has been said, but it's even more than just representation, because the research is very clear. I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of studies now, that more diverse groups in terms of gender and race and backgrounds are more innovative, they're more creative, they have better problem solving, more ideas to come to the table. It really, when we have complex problems, and in the UK they call it wicked problems, more complex problems, you need more diversity to be able to get the best solutions. And we're doing a disadvantage to our state and in any other country when you don't have really diverse voices, including white men. White men and white women and women of color and men of color and just different backgrounds as well.
Thank you. Due to time, I'm just going to jump into a couple more questions, actually 3 more questions probably, or maybe 4, depending. I mean, we have 10 more minutes, but this is so exciting. I mean, I just love this conversation, and we're overlapping in some of the answers to some of the questions that I was considering. But Tara, why is it important to take gender concerns into account in program design and implementation?
Yeah, this is definitely a passion piece for me. This is what we do at the Women's Success Center, and working with colleagues across the state who also run women's centers. These are pieces that we have to be very strategic about. And it ties to the mainstreaming that we talked about earlier, but it goes well beyond that. The way that information is received by different individuals based on their gender identity, their gender expression, and their cultural upbringing is very, very different. So I could run the same program for a group of men and a group of women, and the outcomes may be different. So using really intentional practices to make sure that you're targeting your audience and that what you're providing is relevant for that particular audience is really essential. We also have to take in cultural norms for account. One of the things that I often discuss with our community members is the Women's Success Center here at Utah Valley University. We do data-informed program design for women. It's available to every student because we know that some of those programs could benefit people of any gender identity, but we make them for women to really address the concerns that they have that are unique to them. So being thoughtful about how you choose to execute, how you choose to target, and especially building, I think one of the issues that we have in Utah is we tend to reinvent the wheel when things already exist. I think we probably have more NGOs in the state of Utah than I think any other state in the country. And I love that passion, but I would love to see more collaboration so that the impact can be deeper. And that's one of the reasons I love working with colleagues like this, is because they see that that necessity to synthesize and work together to have greater impact rather than working in isolation. And that's something women are known for, is that networking ability and the ability to connect deeply and meaningfully through their own experiences.
Sounds fantastic. Any comments from the rest of the panelists? No, if not, I'm gonna.
Samira, I think Samira has done just that in her work. And I'm so glad Tara brought that up, because there's so much good research and theory around how to design things for women, programs, initiatives. Yet we have so many like women's conferences and women's programs that you just throw things together and hope that it's going to magically work. But there's such a different layer of understanding of programs and initiatives that actually move the needle, not just are out there to motivate people, but actually make a difference. And I think Samira, with her fabulous work, has been able to really come up with programs that are really moving the needle for these women she serves.
Yeah,
Samira is amazing. Samira is amazing. And let me tell you, you need to talk about the incredible work that you do with all these refugee women that come from the most remote parts of the world, and the amount of effort that you put into place. Tell us a little bit about that.
You know, I brought one of the example for one of our lady. I will say, like, the summary of what it comes to women of the world is to see those women, they come over here, they don't know about the relation, about when I'm gonna speak up and everything. You know, one of the questions actually you have about inheritance, you know, when they come from their country, this is, they know the men, they inherit twice more than women. And we have one of the story to bring, one of the lady that her husband left her for another woman, and he make her as a servant to live with his family. And when she heard me in the radio one time, and she does not speak English very well, someone contacted me and said, well, this woman is being beat up, is being put in here as a servant, 12 years is in here, and she does not speak English. She never took a bus by herself to go somewhere, to the grocery or something like that. You know, I was really kind of upset so much that why is happening in here? This is America, you're supposed to talk, you're supposed to speak up and you know, contact someone to help you. And I remember that day when I went to meet her, she was crying, and her her son was interpreting for me. You know, she said, I'm afraid to get out from here, from this misery. I don't know how to speak English, I cannot be independent. So that's one of the things, unfortunately, you know, they come with this kind of stereotype that I cannot go, and my husband is going to be really mad at me and beat me up and get worse. So advocate for her, teach her, and tell her, no, you could do it by your own. And seriously, that woman, when I saw her, she was so skinny and so sad. And now she has 2 jobs, learn how to drive, learn English, went to visit her family in Pakistan. So it makes her so happy that you give her that it's okay. Men, done that to you, but you have to be responsible about yourself and your son. So this is a way to help, and many stories to share with these things, to talk about, just like I said, mentioned that before, as American, we have the voice, we know the word in English, we speak in English, so make the people to understand. Those women, they need some help. And I really wish everyone who's listening to us and today, to be a friend with those women, to be a friend with them and give them, just say hello and be friend with them and teach them and tell them, it's okay to talk. You're not going to lose your human right. You're not going to lose a house in here and they're going to send you back, just like I said, they need confidence. They need someone to be friend with.
What's amazing with that is that in the work that I do, sometimes even with women who have education and have more, we're still working on confidence from all different levels. We're still just confidence of a woman to step forward and run for office when she has a master's degree. It's amazing that there's so many needs across the spectrum that we need everybody to come together and really help to move things forward. I love, Samira, every time you share an example, I get all teary-eyed because you're doing such life-changing work in your realm, and Tara, helping those students even with the scholarships, go to school, feel like they can stay in school and graduate. All of these things are life-changing.
And you know what, Susan, your feedback on your amazing knowledge and all these things, it makes me so happy, and I learn a lot from you, seriously.
Thank you.
I need to ask you this question, and I apologize, but I need to ask you this question. Is gender equality or equity, inequity per se, a concern for men?
Absolutely. So I think the best metaphor I can think for on this is a teeter-totter. Anybody who's ever been on a teeter-totter, that's what inequity is. It doesn't matter who's on the other end. It's never a good situation, right? You picture 2 little kids on a teeter-totter. If you're always at the very, very top and your feet can't touch the ground, you got a lot of pressure to make sure nothing goes wrong or you're going to fall off.
Correct.
If you're always at the bottom, you never get to have that experience, right? It's finding that balance where everybody can participate together. And then you add intersectionality to that. So if everyone is standing on, you think of a big circle, a big disc, and there's a fulcrum at the middle of that disc, everybody standing around that has to make an active choice to try and find equity and balance, or everybody's off balance. It really doesn't matter what part of the human experience we're talking about. Inequity disadvantages everyone. A simple example from staff that I've worked with previously, husband and wife had no children. The wife decided that she really wanted to go finish a master's degree. And if we were living in an inequitable relationship, it would be all on him to make sure that her tuition was paid for, that he had a salary that could support their family. And, she would just get to go to school and not have any of those responsibilities. They could make a choice as a partnership, in an equitable partnership, where he could work and she could go to school, and then they flipped. He went on to do an MBA and she worked to support his tuition and their family costs, right? It's that give and take in an equitable fashion that makes things successful. And it's when we're in an unbalanced situation that inequity puts burden on both sides of the party, just depending on which perspective you want to play into.
And I'll just jump in quickly and just say, so I have a different perspective. I love that one. But it is more and more, the gender equity issue is more and more important to men who are allies, because they get that their companies will benefit, that the government will benefit if it's not just white men like themselves often. And so they're concerned about that too, because they know when you understand the business case that it benefits everyone if you're engaged and really bring diversity and inclusion and belonging and equity to your cities or your states or your companies.
That is great. Tara, I know that you lead not only the Women's Success Center here on campus, but also the We Care Center. And at the end of the day, this is Utah. And in Utah, many women decide just to stay home, right, and take care of the children. How can we value and support women who chooses to spend time out of the workforce to dedicate their efforts at home to raise children?
Oh, absolutely. Unpaid care work is one of the most, I think, underestimated values that any individual brings to the table. Pre-pandemic, it was about a third of families nationwide where the father was actually the primary parent, not the mother. That trend, we're a little bit slower with that in Utah. We're about a quarter. Post-pandemic, it will be interesting to see how that responsibility has changed, or if it has changed. But valuing unpaid care work, unpaid labor, as though it were paid is one of the quickest paths to equity. Just because a paycheck's not on the other side of parenting, for example, doesn't mean it's not highly valued. And you look at the value that provides to the person who is in the workforce. If we're assuming a two-parent household, one at home, one at work, the ability to have more flexibility, participate in travel, participate in evening and weekend projects for that employee, that's a huge added value that comes with a stay-at-home partner. So whatever that person's role and the dynamic they choose is, we really have to consider that as though it had its own income. And there have been so many studies over the years, I know Susan and I have talked about these before, that put a dollar amount on that stay-at-home parent and what that looks like to be the kid's taxi to and from everything, to cook, to clean, to raise kids, early childhood education, tutoring and helping with homework. All of those things come with a price tag. Just because we don't have a payroll attached to it doesn't mean that it's worth any less. So really shifting that mentality and valuing those two different types of work as the same work, one just has a payroll attached to it and the other doesn't, is a great way to bring more benefit. I also think it helps with gender equity for men, because if men are culturally expected to, they're contributing to the family, well, that contribution can look like a lot of different things. And if we value unpaid care work the same way we value a paycheck, they can contribute more in the household, which strengthens the relationship, strengthens the family, and enables that woman to become more of her best self.
Remarkable. Thank you very much. Any last comments, Susan or Samira?
Yeah, sure. For our women, because they are staying home, and with their kids and everything. So what we do is we have mentors that to go and meet with this woman in the home, and teach her English and help her, with anything, to be friends with her, So we have this program actually since I started Women of the World, because I saw some of the women, they have kids, she just had a baby and she cannot get out and to learn English or to learn about how to, to citizenship classes and all these things. So this is what we do is actually, and the other things is we encourage the women if they wanted to open their own business like catering. So we try always in our event to order this catering from this women, that are sitting home. So this is what we do in our organization.
And I would just say, I would just end by saying we have to try to be less judgmental as a society. And I think we're getting worse, but we need to value women for the choices they make and the roles they choose to be in, whether it's all stay-at-home mom. That's one of the hardest roles I've ever had in life. or it's working, or it's a combination of part-time and this and that, and being engaging in the community. We all have different purposes and callings, whether you're religious or not, and we just need to hopefully make sure that girls and women have equal choices actually to make, and then really value those and lift girls and women and lift boys and men, no matter what choices they're making, so that we can be just really better in the state of Utah as a society in general.
Thank you very much. Samira, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Could you please tell us about this great event that you're coming up with?
Yeah, sure. So every year we do a fashion show, and this year is going to be a virtual fashion show for everyone could see us in Facebook Live, and you could find a lot of information in womenofwar.org. So this is really great opportunity to Utahns to learn about their new neighbors, how they are beautiful, bring the culture, bring the diversity in Utah, and the successful story. So this year actually is going to be international, because we partner with the United Nations in Geneva and in New York, and to give a hope for the women in camp and everywhere, to see those beautiful women with their beautiful traditional clothes. And I hope everyone gonna enjoy that. It's free. Since it's free, of course, we ask people to do VIP, to pay $20, $5 or whatever, and this is the only time when we do the fundraiser for this year. So this is a highlight for Utah everywhere. Internationally, I got a lot of people from Beirut, from Turkey, from Middle East, from Europe, that gonna be seeing this fashion show. And to tell, our First Lady Ivie Cox, she will speak, and she will give encouragement and show how Utah is kind and accept refugee and help the refugee women in here. So
thank you very much. I see that Justin actually has posted the link in our Facebook page, but just briefly remind us the day and the time.
March 10th at 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies, I want you to know that I've been touched. Honestly, you really have answered questions. You have been educating us, and what an incredible panel. I really thank you. And I just want you to know that you have someone in this office known as the Office for Global Engagement that is very supportive on the initiatives that you are trying to pursue. So again, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon, almost afternoon now, and for the emphasis and the enthusiasm and the passion that you folks share, which is so true and so true and so valuable. Again, thank you, and thanks everyone that has been following this proceedings through this panel, and for having just a great time and a good successful event. For your information, next week is a spring break here at Utah Valley University. However, the following week for our global dialogue on Tuesday, March 16th at 11 o'clock, we are hosting the Honorable Jonathan Tichy. He's the Consul of the Czech Republic. So I'll be interviewing him. Jonathan is a good friend as well, and he's going to tell us about how beautiful Prague is, and I know that, but he's going to tell us how the Czech Republic is doing in regards to COVID, economics, and so forth. To see a full schedule of our events, make sure that you access our website at uvu.edu/global. Again, ladies, thank you everyone, and as we sign off today, make sure you choose to be a global citizen. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Baldomero.